Hey guys, and welcome to the Fish Room. I'm Rachel O'Leary and it's time for a species spotlight. This week I thought we'd do something a little different. It's been so busy down here and so much has been going on that there's a lot of things that I just haven't had time to show you. So I thought instead of doing a species spotlight today, we would do sort of some species updates, and I could take you around the fish room, show you some updated footage of a lot of the fish that you guys have been asking about, show you some unboxing of some of the new species I got in, and show you the incredible sight of 200 Farlowella catfish. This won't be something I do very often, but I thought maybe every once in a while it'd be fun to have a bit of a departure and just show you some updated fish shots. So let's get started. So back in July, I did a species profile on these guys when I had a bunch of big mature adults in. And I called them Masters of Disguise, and you can certainly see why I did that, as they really do look like twigs. And as we look around this aquarium where there are a staggering 200 of this fish, you can really see what I mean. I see bodies and tails and everything camouflaged everywhere. And you know, they're really cool fish because they do spend the vast majority of their time either completely camouflaged within decor or straight up and down in plain sight like they are on the aquarium glass here. And I just think they're a really, really cool fish. Now, I think what's really interesting when you get a lot of these guys aren't social or anything. They don't need to be in groups. But it makes it easy to sort of prove the point that a lot of catfish enthusiasts make, that there's a lot of different species being imported. And as you look around, all of these fish were labeled as the same type of Farlowella. Let's see if I can get it in focus. But there's quite a difference in how quite a few of them look, both in their coloration, their pattern, their nose length, as well as the amount of scutes, or the rows of sort of plates on their chest, which is one of the ways that people determine what species they have. Now, if any of you are interested in learning about all the various species of Farlowella, I have some really, really great papers that have been forwarded on to me for ID purposes. Now you can see these guys both have 2 layers of scutes, which are these, sort of looks like almost like a chest plate on these guys. You can also see how they move, and you can also see the little hairs on their rostrum, which can be useful to determine gender. Now, how many rows of those plates and the shape of those plates plays a big role in people being able to determine which species they have. But even just looking in the aquarium here, you can see how different the color pattern on that one is from that one. Now, I think these guys are all really cool. And while I'm not entirely sure exactly which species I have in here, does it appear that many of them are the same or a similar species, though there is certainly a good amount of variety. These are one of my favorite mid-sized community fishes, just because they're so docile and they're so cool. And when they breed, they do the exact same thing they're doing now. The male generally lays their eggs right on the glass, and they sit there right in your face fanning them until they hatch, and I think that's really neat. All in all, I figured seeing this many Farlowella at once is not something most of you would likely ever get to do, so I thought it would be cool to show you, and I hope you've enjoyed it. There are literally Farlowella everywhere we look in this 75-gallon aquarium. So as you guys know, I get fish in all the time. At least once a week, sometimes multiple times a week. And as I told you a couple weeks ago, I had planned a really, really big fish order. Well, unfortunately for me, that huge order didn't turn into much of an order at all. I'll show you some of the highlights here in a future video. So what happens is, or how I order generally is, I'll order from a transshipper and I'll get anywhere from 15 to 30 species at a time in bulk, several hundred per species. And then I get those in, I quarantine them, and I sell them. And that's much more cost effective, and it means that I can keep my prices a bit lower for my customers. When those fish don't come in, I buy from a wholesaler. And it's really not my preference. I pay more for the fish. And the real reason I don't particularly like to do that is I feel like the least amount of steps that you can do in the process of getting fish, the better it is for them once they get to their end result. So these are rosy loaches, super adorable. I should have a couple bags of those. So what I mean by that is, you know, they're collected from the wild, they're exported, they go to a wholesaler, and then they're sent to the retailer, and then they go to the consumer, and that is just an awful lot of steps. I prefer to cut as many of those steps out as possible. And when I can, I try and get stuff direct. However, that is extremely expensive and not something that I can always do. So a lot of times I'll buy from various wholesalers in order to get, you know, lesser quantities of fish, you know, under 100 fish, or under 100 of each type of fish. And the benefit of this is that I can, you know, get in a bigger diversity without having as much financial output overall. But again, the drawback is the fish then cost me a little bit more money, so my revenue is not as good. When I get things in from a wholesaler, you would think that I would be quarantining them for less time, but I actually end up quarantining them for longer than some of the stuff that I get more direct, simply because they've already gone through the travel process several times. And as I've talked to you guys about in the past, I really feel like that contributes to a lot of illness in fish, just that stress response. So I try and give them as big of a break as possible before sending them on to their final forever homes. Now when I'm packing these guys, I first do a good visual inspection in the bag to see if there's any fish that look damaged or dead. If so, I'll want to pull them out, obviously, before adding them to their quarantine aquarium. And then, as I've talked to you guys about a bunch of times, I just try and get them out of their water and into an aquarium as quickly as possible. Now, this particular wholesaler I really like because, like me, they put polyfilter in the bag, so I have a really high survival rate for the most part. It's very uncommon for me to have any issues at all, which is a relief, and it does reduce that overall shipping stress. So as you guys know, after I add the fish to the tank, I label them with this masking tape that has what species are in the aquarium as well as the date that they came in. I try not to rely on my brain too heavily, because this is a whole lot of aquariums, and I find that keeping the labels on the tank like this really helps me keep straight how long everything's been in quarantine. And then I'll add another color tape if I need to medicate it all. And you can also see floating up at the surface right there that I've added polyfilter to all aquariums that have had new fish added. Let's take a look at some of the fish I got in. Well, these guys were just added maybe 5 minutes ago, but these are Indian drape fin barbs and clown barbs that I got in as a special order for a customer of mine. And already you can see those clown barbs coloring up gorgeously. Really pretty fish. Now, I try not to combine fish in quarantine very often, but every once in a while I have to. So in this aquarium, I've combined chili rasboras and neon blue Sundanio. You can see some of them already, the blue especially, really coming through on some of those Sundanio. Here we have some rosy loaches. It's been a couple months since I've been able to get them, so I was excited to be able to get them in stock again. They're one of my favorite small loaches, and you can see how they get their hovering moniker by their behavior. They just climb the glass up and down and are really, really fun, active, tiny, little, peaceful loaches. Up here we have some more barbs for that customer. These are panda barbs. They're looking very good. Again, just added a few minutes ago. Whoops. Here we have some more barbs for that customer. They're looking great. Again, just added a few minutes ago. I got in a bunch more restock of green neons. They're a really good seller for me, so I always try and keep several hundred in stock. Because I get them in so frequently, they're really predictable in how they do in quarantine, so they get plants right away. Here we can only see a couple, but I got in more dwarf pencils. They're one of my favorite fish of all time. Below them are Kriegi tetras and the diptail pencils. As you can see, they get their name from that 45-degree angle they get when they swim. Really neat fish. I got in a large group of Remlinos, the Hemigrammus blaheri, due to popular demand. Again, only been in the tank a few minutes, and you can see their noses are already starting to color up. They're really fantastic fish. Got in a bunch of Habrosus cories. You can see how tiny and wiggly they are. Absolutely adorable. As well as teeny tiny baby panda cories in the tank below them. These guys I'll probably QT for a couple of extra weeks just to let them put some size on. I don't generally like selling them this small. They're smaller than the Habrosus above them and can make shipping a little more stressful on them. But they're eating well and doing well, so a couple more weeks. Here are those juvenile triple red cockatoides that I showed you guys yesterday. You can see they are not at all phased by being added to this aquarium and have colored up and look amazing. That Otocinclus that's in there gives you an idea of how tiny they are still, making it pretty difficult to sex them, especially because these are, you know, a tank bred strain of triple reds, so even the females get a decent amount of fin color. So you can see this one right here is probably a female because of that black pectoral fin, and obviously that big male there with all that super color is a boy. But some of these smaller guys I'm gonna have to wait a bit to see what they are, but they look beautiful. Thanks again, Chuck. Now this is not a fish for sale, but I just wanted to show it to you. This is a Pistogramma species nanae, and this is the male, and while it's not very flashy, I particularly like them. I mean, look how long those dorsal rays are. And you get some really nice blue cheek color. Hopefully he'll show off for you here in a second. But sometimes I think that these wild types are just absolutely underrated. You can see those Kriegi tetras have settled in perfectly and are really looking great. I got a ton of dwarf anchor cats in, doing what dwarf anchor cats do, which is not a whole lot, but they are adorable and tiny. And you guys have been waiting for these for a long time. You can see how wonderful they look. I got in a group of peef puffers several weeks ago, which are ready to go now. And you can tell they have nice round bellies. And they look really good. Next to them again are those Next to them again are the CPD, and you can just see that they're so tiny right now that they don't have any sort of sexual dimorphism, so I'll grow them out a bit so that I can sell them in sex groups for people who are interested in breeding them. But their body condition looks good, and they're obviously healthy, just they're maybe 1/4 of an inch at this point. Hillstream tank is doing what it does, looking pretty good. And next door are my super red cherry shrimp that I've had off my list for quite a long time. Starting to get to the point where I'll have enough to sell again. I like to let the babies get to about 1/2 an inch. So I'm really letting this colony rebound before I list them. We'll just end it with some feeding shots. These are head and tail light tetras. Green neons. Three guys. Rosy loaches. Barbs. Rummy nose and sids. More barbs. Crebensis tank. Those Odessa barbs are freaking gorgeous too. Salt and pepper cories. Those baby pandas. Here's the most recent ram fry. I know a lot of you have been waiting for them as well. Dog pile of snails, rainbow shrimp, baby plecos, all kinds of jazz. So as you can see, it's business as usual in the fish room. I still have maybe 8 or 10 tanks left to fill with livestock, but for the most part my stock list is filling out again. I'm pretty happy with what I have to offer. As always, thanks for your continued support, and let me know below if you have any suggestions, comments, or questions.